Greetings everyone, I hope you're doing great. I hope you're taking good care of yourselves. Welcome to this video. Sundays are for videos on atheism. That's what I'm trying to pull off. So I made my previous videos of reasons that's why I became an atheist after being a Christian, and the comment sections were both good and bad, and I really appreciate the fact that you guys went in my comment section and left those comments, because that's the only way that we guys who create videos on the internet get to understand whether our videos are even reaching out there. So thank you guys for that work. By reading through the comments, I came to a conclusion that when having conversations with Christians or theists about the existence of God, there needs to be a burden of proof, and that burden of proof should really rest upon the person who is making that positive claim. If you've been watching atheistic YouTube, or you have been engaging with, let's say, any sort of atheistic content, you've probably heard about the term burden of proof, and you may have heard of things such as the shifting of the burden of proof and so on. Today I'm going to be talking about burden of proof. What is the burden of proof, and what does it mean for the burden of proof to rest upon you? And also, what is shifting of the burden of proof? Those are things I'm going to be discussing in this short video. So let's start by defining what the burden of proof is. Burden of proof is simply the responsibility or the obligation of someone who is making a positive claim to present arguments or reasons as to why they make that positive claim. In this case, I am going to be talking about burden of proof when it comes to the existence of God. Now, when having conversations with many Christians, you are always going to find yourself attacked, or you're going to find yourself in a position where you're going to be circled and told to prove God does not exist. So in that case, you should know the kind of atheist you are actually. And what I mean is, there may be basically two types of atheists. The first one is the person is going to say God does not exist, and I'm not one of those. I am simply a person who just will believe in God if I get good reasons to. The second part, or the second kind of atheist, is the one who is going to be making claims about how God does not exist. So those are the ones who are making the positive claim. And in such scenarios, Christians should ask those atheists who are making those arguments about how God doesn't exist. They should pin them down and ask them why God does not exist. So in that case, the burden of proof rests upon the person who is making the positive claim about how God does not exist. Now, when it comes to guys like me who are atheists because we are not convinced, the burden of proof rests upon that person who is making the positive claim about the existence of God. And if at all they try to lure you into having to explain why God does not exist, then they are committing a fallacy. They are trying to shift the burden of proof. It's just as simple as that. You claim God exists, show evidence that God exists. You claim God does not exist, show evidence that God does not exist. If you are an agnostic, then the burden of proof does not rest on you. Simple like that. If you are an agnostic theist, you do not have anything to prove to an atheist that God exists. But if you are agnostic theist, then you have a lot of work to do. You have to lay the foundation and tell an atheist about how God exists. On the other hand, if you are an agnostic, just like I am, you do not have any sort of proof you have to tell to a theist to tell them that God does not exist. But then if you're in a position where you can really say God does not exist, you need to have an understanding of science, an understanding of philosophy, an understanding of religion. You need to have all knowledge that there is for you to prove that God does not exist. In my journey as an atheist, I've noticed one thing that has really been pissing me off a lot when having these conversations with Christians or theists of other religions. Theists always try to play the game of having to make atheists prove God does not exist. But the problem with this is it is really, really, really hard for you to negate something most of the claims about the existence of God are unfalsifiable. In fact, God may exist. God may exist. It's just that we as humans do not have reasons to ever prove he exists or he doesn't exist. Now, proving God does not exist requires someone to be so much knowledgeable for them to be in a position where they can say, God doesn't exist. And I respect people who say that, people who make the positive claim that God does not exist. And for such people, I really respect it even more when they are in positions where they can give serious reasons about how God does not exist. Now, out of humility, I am going to say that I am not those. For me, I believe God may exist, but then I do not have serious reasons to believe in his existence, and therefore I have no reasons to believe. Why should I believe? One of the things that makes me happy, or one of the things that makes me wonder, or one of the things that actually enjoy about this whole thing of creating videos about atheism, is that you get to talk to Christians and you get to see how many of them reason. One video that I made was about how I became an atheist, and I remember saying something like, I chose to be an atheist. Now, that was a statement I made because I wasn't really thinking about what I was talking. By saying I chose to be an atheist, I wasn't saying that I jumped on a bandwagon of becoming an atheist. That's not what I meant in that video. I was saying something along the lines of having examined all the evidence that there is for the existence of God, and having read the Bible, and having gone to church, and having tried to even be a minister, I came to the conclusion that maybe what I'm believing is something that I'm believing because my mom and my dad are atheists. And at that point, I also started seeing things in the world. I saw how if you are to analyze reality and see reality for what it is, you are most likely to see the lack of existence of God. When I saw those, I tried to look into apologetics. I tried to read the Bible for myself. And after doing that, I then got to a point where I was not convinced about the claims of Christianity, or the claims that Christianity made about the nature of the existence of God. And finding myself in that position led me to a point where I could actually look on the other side. I used to ask myself that if God really exists, why do atheists exist? Why are there people who do not believe? Until I got to the point where I was not convinced. When it comes to belief, you always have to be convinced about what you believe in. You always have to be convinced about what you believe in. That is very important. And that is why I'm an atheist. Being an atheist, I was never convinced about any of the claims that the religion I was in or other religions made about the existence of God. When I compared reality and what religions claimed about the existence of God, I got myself in a position where I was not really convinced about the existence of God. So how does that relate to burden of proof? When having conversations with atheists and theists as well about belief and existence of God, the burden of proof always rests upon the person who is making the positive claim. Now, by being an atheist, I lack the belief in God, but I require evidence to become a theist again. If at all God shows up in my bedroom right now, I am not in the position where I can say that is not God. I will ask them, are you God? If they say yes, then I'll tell them to do some other thing that I will have to show to other people to make them believe that it was God that I showed. And the good thing about our generations is we have cameras, and these cameras can allow us to basically present evidence that people can see. I think that can be really good evidence for the existence of God. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I did not make this video in any way to dunk on Christians or dunk on theists. I just wanted to make sure that we understand burden of proof. Whenever you deal with Christians or you deal with atheists, you have to ask them if they are in a position where they're making a positive claim. If an atheist says God does not exist, pin them to the wall and ask them, prove God does not exist. And if they cannot put themselves in a position where they can strongly justify the non-existence of God, then that debate is over. That conversation should not be had. On the other hand, if a Christian ever tells you God exists, tell them to show you how God exists. They are going to make all sorts of arguments about the existence of God. But all those are arguments. In fact, conversations with Christians are always going to end up in arguments. Why? Because evidence for the existence of God is not something that we can really present. And in such cases, many people will still be skeptical, just like I am. At this point, I've got myself to a point where friends are sending me textbooks from apologists like William Lane Craig and other YouTube videos that explain how we should believe in God and evidence for the existence of God and all that stuff. But when I look into all of it, it seems to be the kind of thing that Christians should show other Christians to reassure them of their beliefs. It's not something that we as atheists can be convinced of, because all we require is good reasons, solid evidence for us to believe that God really exists. And if at all you think we are liars, if at all you think that we just want to sin or we just want to be in positions where we hold ourselves as more knowledgeable, then you are wrong. You need to understand someone and not pretend to know what is in their brain. I've watched a lot of apologetics here on YouTube, and I've watched guys like Inspiring Philosophy say things like, if at all God showed himself, then we as atheists could not believe. But the problem with that is having to pretend to think that you can read the minds of others. For me, it's simple. If God showed himself in a way that I could show to other 1 billion people and they all agree on what I said, then that would be proof of God's existence. Just that. If I can record God with this camera I'm using on my iPhone and show it to the world, then that would be very simple evidence to prove God exists. But since none of that can happen in the world we live in right now, then I don't have good reasons to believe that God exists. Okay, thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. I am planning on making a schedule where I'll be sharing my thoughts on atheism. I am not an atheist who has been an atheist for very many years. I've just been an atheist for about a year. But with that, I have got to appreciate the fact that you are more truthful than many of the Christians out there, because you believe based on what you can really justify